Welcome to Storyflix. In this video, we will explain Ondine. This film tells the story of a fisherman named Syracuse who lives in a small village on Ireland's coast. One afternoon, a mystifying and beautiful girl named Ondine gets caught in his nets as she wades along the water. Aboard the boat, Ondine brings Syracuse great luck, seems drawing the fish towards his nets. Who is she actually? Let's find out on Ondine. This story begins in the Irish Ocean. A fisherman named Syracuse is fishing in the sea. He did not expect to catch a beautiful woman among the fish pile when the fishing net was lifted. Syracuse immediately saved the woman by giving her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The woman then coughed water. Amazingly, she was still alive, even though she had swallowed a lot of water. Syracuse called for help, but the woman insisted that she was fine and didn't want to see anyone else. But she didn't remember her name at all. Finally, Syracuse did not call the police and took the woman to an empty house that used to belong to his late mother. Syracuse then left her alone because he had an urgent thing to do. It turns out that Syracuse went to his ex-wife's house. Her name is Maura. Syracuse came to pick up his daughter, Annie, and take her to the hospital. Annie was suffering from kidney failure, so she had to go through dialysis therapy at the hospital every week. While waiting for his daughter through the dialysis process, Syracuse tells a story. The story was about a fisherman who found a beautiful woman in his fishing net. Finally, Annie finished her dialysis therapy. Annie then got surprised because she could borrow the electric wheelchair from the hospital. Syracuse drove Annie back to her mother's house. There is Maura's boyfriend named Alex. Maura and Alex often get drunk, but they still care about Annie. The following day, Syracuse was about to go fishing. Then he met again with the beautiful woman he had found yesterday. The woman asked Syracuse to take her to catch fish with him. Syracuse asked the woman's name again. She then said that her name is Ondine, which means girl from the ocean. Unfortunately, that day, Syracuse caught very few fish. Suddenly, Ondine began to sing with her melodious voice. That's when Syracuse lifted his net, and he was stunned to find many giant lobsters there. Apparently, Ondine's singing brought luck to him. His catch was huge that day. Upon returning to the island, Syracuse invites Ondine to come to town to sell their catch. But Ondine refuses because she doesn't want to meet anyone except Syracuse. Ondine rushed back to the house. After selling the lobster, Syracuse goes to the clothing store and looks for clothes for Ondine. After that, he went to Annie's school to pick up his daughter. That's when Annie challenges her father to race home. On the way, Annie asks Syracuse to continue his story. According to Annie, the woman in her father's fairy tale is Selkie. Selkie is a character in mythology who is a seal that can turn into a human. After dropping Annie at Maura's house, Syracuse went home. However, Annie, curious about her father's fairy tales, and decides to follow him home. Syracuse returned to his late mother's house. He then gave a lot of food and new clothes to Ondine. Ondine was pleased to get all of the gifts. She then kissed Syracuse's cheek. With a red face, Syracuse left. Meanwhile, Annie suspects her father is hiding something at her grandmother's house. She then goes to the library to find information about Selkies. The next day, a curious Annie decides to go to her late grandmother's house. There, she saw a woman swimming in the ocean. That's for the first time Annie and Ondine met. Annie was very sure that the woman in front of her was a Selkie and not a human. The two then chatted a lot. But Annie turns out to know a lot about Ondine and why she went to land instead of at sea. She was sure that Ondine had lost her seal coat. According to legend, without the coat, she could not return to the ocean. Ondine and Annie then became friends. The scene shifts to a man who is looking at the vast ocean. Surely, the man is looking for something. The next day, Syracuse invited Ondine to go to sea with him again. On the boat, Syracuse teaches Ondine how to drive, but in the middle of the ocean, a marine officer passed them. Ondine was so scared and immediately hid. She then uses her feet to drive. The sight made Syracuse uncomfortable seeing Ondine's sexy legs. After that, Ondine started humming again. And surprisingly, now Syracuse's net caught so many fish. In fact, he had never caught this many fish. However, the marine officers stopped at the ship because they were suspicious of Syracuse's large catch. They thought Syracuse was using a forbidden net. The officers also checked the compartment of the boat and found Ondine, who was hiding there. Ondine tells them that Syracuse uses a regular net when catching the fish. Finally, the officers left. Syracuse invites Ondine to go to the market to sell the fish. Since other people have seen her, Ondine agreed to join Syracuse to the market. Meanwhile, when they arrived on the mainland, the other fishermen were amazed to see such a beautiful woman. In the fish market, Syracuse earned a lot of money from selling his fish. They then went into town and took Annie. Ondine is busy buying new clothes while some women watch her from outside the shop. They were so amazed to see Ondine's beauty. The next day, Annie came to visit Ondine. Ondine decides to teach Annie to swim in the sea. While swimming, Ondine suddenly panicked. It turned out that at the bottom of the sea, she found her lost seal coat. Annie said that she should bury her coat in the ground to live another 7 years on land. It turns out Annie read the story from a library book. They then went to bury the coat in the garden behind the house. In the afternoon, Syracuse takes Ondine and Annie to a festival in town. Annie tells the Selkie legend and asks Ondine to admit that she is a Selkie. But Ondine denies it. In the middle of the festival by the sea, the mysterious man seemed to be looking for Ondine. Arriving at the festival, Annie still forces Ondine to admit that she is a Selkie. Because she didn't confess, Annie drove her wheelchair fast and jumped into the sea. Without thinking, Ondine immediately ran and jumped into the sea to save her. Luckily Annie survived. Annie told her father that Ondine could breathe underwater. Annie was driven back home, and Syracuse took Ondine back to her late mother's house. Syracuse then tells her that he used to be an alcoholic. That's why he didn't get custody of Annie. He decided to change for the sake of his daughter. That night, the two get carried away and started having sex. Unexpectedly, Ondine enjoys being with Syracuse. The next day, Syracuse went to a church and recounted about Ondine. He began to fear losing Ondine. Outside the church, he meets the mysterious man. The man asked about Ondine. According to Syracuse, Ondine is a woman who brings good luck to him. That day Syracuse accompanied Annie for dialysis therapy again. After returning from the hospital, they could not find Maura. So Annie took her father to a bar. Sure enough, Maura and Alex were playing billiards and getting drunk. Syracuse asked permission for Annie to stay at his house, but Maura wouldn't allow it. She even asked Syracuse to come home to meet his mermaid. While sleeping, Ondine woke up hearing the sound of an approaching car. It turns out that the mysterious man came to look for her. Syracuse, who came home, was so shocked because his house was falling apart as if someone had damaged it. He immediately went looking for Ondine and managed to find her on the river bank. It turns out that the mysterious man is her husband, who came looking for her. Syracuse asked her to make a wish for her husband to leave. Annie told him if she can make a wish, and all her wishes will be granted. But Ondine wanted to make a wish for Annie to recover from her illness. Ondine's words touched Syracuse. Meanwhile, the mysterious man is looking for Ondine in the middle of the city. At the same time, Maura, who was drunk, was on her way home with Annie and Alex. Unfortunately, the two cars collided, causing an accident. Alex was even thrown and died on the spot. At that time, Syracuse, who was taking Ondine to town, saw the accident. He was so panicked when he realized it was Maura's car. Luckily Annie survived the accident. At the hospital, Syracuse is told that Annie needs immediate surgery for her kidney transplant. It turns out Alex has kidney tissue that matches Annie's. It was at the hospital that Ondine met her husband, who was injured. Her husband asks her to come home with him, but Ondine has one condition. She didn't want him to interfere with her life again. Annie's operation went well. Unexpectedly, it was all thanks to Ondine's prayer for Annie's recovery. The next day, Syracuse and Maura sprinkle Alex's ashes in the ocean. Maura then permitted Syracuse to take care of Annie, but on one condition. Ondine can't be with him. That night, Maura forces Syracuse to accompany her for a drink at the bar. At first, Syracuse refused, but Maura insisted until he finally agreed. That night Syracuse was drunk. He then looked for Ondine, who was hiding on his boat. He took her to an island with a lighthouse. There are many seals on the beach. Syracuse forced Ondine to come down to the island. Still drunk, he then left her alone. Ondine, who realized it, immediately chased Syracuse's boat. She was so sad because she had to part with him. Syracuse says humans and Selkies can't live together. When night fell, Ondine took off her shoes and coat. She then jumped into the sea and swam. That night, Syracuse went to pick up Annie and took her back to his house. Annie asked where Ondine was. His father said Ondine was gone for a while. Annie was so sure Ondine would come back because she left something behind. In the morning, Annie is watching TV. There is a show showing a man singing. Syracuse realizes that the song the man sings is the same as the song Ondine often sings. He realized his stupidity. It turns out that the song is not imaginary song and Ondine is not a fairy tale's character. He immediately went to the island with the lighthouse. Unfortunately, Ondine could not be found. He realized the existence of Ondine's shoes and coat. And he could see her on the other side of the island. He quickly headed for the island. There Ondine lay cold. Syracuse hugged her tightly. Finally, Ondine tells the truth about herself. It turned out she was a drug dealer from Romania. Together with his partner, Vladik, they brought a lot of heroin to be smuggled. However, their action was caught by the Coast Guard. Ondine jumped into the sea to escape the officers' ambush. Meanwhile, Vladik was arrested because he could not swim. But Ondine was swept away by the waves and drowned. That's when she was caught in Syracuse's net and saved. That night Syracuse brought Ondine back to his house, but it turns out that there were uninvited guests. Vladik was there, threatening to kill Annie. Syracuse and Vladik got into a fight. Unfortunately, Vladik is not alone. His friend came and immediately pointed a gun at him. Meanwhile, Vladik asks Ondine to give up all his heroin. In order to save Syracuse and his daughter, Ondine reveals where the heroin is hiding. But when Vladik dug in the backyard garden, they couldn't find it. It turned out that Annie had removed the coat containing the heroin. Annie still believes that Ondine is a Selkie and she hides her coat so that Ondine can live with them forever. Finally, Annie said that the coat was in the lobster trap. Ondine, who realized that Vladik couldn't swim, pushed him down in the sea. In the end, Vladik died because he was trying to get the heroin in the lobster trap. The police arrested Vladik's colleague and took Ondine to the police station. The next day, Syracuse went back to the priest to talk. The priest tells Syracuse that Ondine will be deported. However, she can remain in Ireland if she marries and becomes an Irish citizen. Finally, Syracuse asked the priest to bless them in a marriage. Both of them got married with the help of Annie. Now, the little family is living happily. This film ends.